Hi.
So, you're Shelly Ducharme, right? You are the principal here at Swan Valley Middle School. Can you tell me a bit about how you decided to go into the educational field and your journey thus far?
Sure. Actually, I knew from a pretty young age that I really enjoyed working with children. As a high school athlete, I coached younger girls in gymnastics, and I really enjoyed that. So pretty much, high school on, I knew I wanted to work with kids. And going to college, I wasn't really sure what avenue, whether it would be child psychology, but education ended up being my path.
Okay.
And I started out as an elementary kindergarten teacher.
And where did you go from there?
So I taught kindergarten for several years, and then I transitioned into a second grade teaching position for a couple of years. And then I taught, I actually had a different position that was literacy coaching, kind of an at-risk teacher. So I got to work with kids that really struggled with reading, and I was able to take that position because of my work that my graduate work I did becoming a reading specialist.
Okay. And how long have you been in the educational field?
This is my 20th year.
That's awesome. And how would you explain summer slide to someone that knows nothing about it?
Summer slide, I would explain, I would kind of use that analogy of if you don't use it, you lose it, or you snooze, you lose, sort of, because really that's what summer slide is. It's when kids, whatever age, if they're not flexing their brain, that muscle, they're not using it, then they start to regress or they lose some of the skill that they had.
And why do you believe it's important to combat summer slide in kids?
Definitely, it's important so that when kids get back to school the following year, that they aren't having to go backwards to go forward in their education. So, when you start a school year in the fall, obviously you spend a little bit of time reviewing prior content and things from before. But if we could eliminate or shrink summer slide, it's a lot less time that would have to be spent working back in order to get kids caught back up to where they left off the year before. So it would allow us to move forward quicker.
So going from a teacher in elementary school and middle school and all of that stuff, what age groups do you think are like the most affected by it?
So I kind of have two thoughts on that. One, the most critical age is early. Birth to 5 are the biggest developmental ages, and you get the biggest bang for your buck as far as getting those little ones kindergarten through second grade, those skill building foundational skills that they need for learning. So in that regard, that's a really critical age to try to support or eliminate the summer slide. But I also believe that's the easiest age to work towards. Their families many families still at night, they have bedtime story and things like that. And so those are some pretty simple things that are really pretty easy to build into your routine with little ones. I think it's the middle school, high school, while it's not as critical for foundational skills, it's more of an issue because just the routine and the day, what they do in a day, there's less opportunity for sort of the play or the building of those skills. And so I think it's probably more significant the older you get because there's less of that like story time at night or, working on math facts or putting words up around your house. So
So just different aspects.
Okay.
Yeah. And what subjects do you think are the most affected?
Well, I'm gonna say reading first. But reading and math, and I'm just going to say that because those are the two foundational skills. Those are your meat and potatoes, right? So if you're strong in math and reading, the other subject comprehension is going to come with those skills. That's your biggest bang for your buck, reading and math.
Okay. And why do you believe summer slide happens in children?
I think there's two reasons it happens. One is there's a challenge or barrier of for some families getting materials available to kids because they're not coming to school every day or going to the library once a week where they can get those materials. So I think the challenge is having the resources at home. Our local libraries do a really good job of having reading programs.
Like events and something.
Yeah, but then there's the barrier that not all families can get their kids to the library, or there's
Low income.
Working families, things like that. Read that question to me again, because there was another component to what.
Why do you believe summer slide happens in children?
Oh, okay. So one was the barrier of getting the supplies, and then the other, I think that. With most families having both parents that are working or so many single parent families that are working, it's really hard to get that into your day. So even if kids are home all summer or home all day, but parents are working, by the time they get home and they get dinner or do baths or play outside, there's really not a lot of time. You have to be really intentional about making time for 10 minutes a night for reading, or 5 minutes to play Monopoly or Yahtzee or something that has to do with numbers,
Just
right?
keep their minds active.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. I really didn't think about that aspect of it, but it makes sense. Just scheduling. How do you suggest we combat summer slide in kids?
Well, I think schools try to help with that. We offer summer programs for kids that qualify. If they're the younger age, it's more if they're at risk or they're struggling academically. High school, it's more credit recovery. So there are some summer school programs available, so we can rely on those. Really encouraging families to make use of the community resources that are available, the library programs, things like that. And if that's not an option, I think really educating families on exactly what you're doing, educating them on summer slide, letting them know how they can get resources, but helping them understand really the importance of it, because parents love their kids, and if they really know how important this is, then it makes it a little bit easier to make it a priority or to be more intentional about doing things at night, every night. Let's make sure we still read before we go to bed, or let's make sure that if we do a family game night, that we play something like Yahtzee, or we play something like Uno where there's numbers or skills involved.
So how did you get your start in education, and what was the process to get to where you are now?
So currently I'm the executive director at the Institute for Excellence in Education. We are a nonprofit located in Michigan with a focus on providing professional development and coaching to K-12 educators. I started in education as a teacher, like most folks do in education, and spent several years in the classroom before I became a school administrator. And while I was a teacher and an administrator, I had the opportunity to participate in professional development offered by this organization. And so then when the director at the time decided to retire, she called to see if I was interested in doing this work. And so here I am.
Okay. So what is your role at the Institute for Excellence?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm the executive director, and my role is really to provide leadership to the organization, both through vision, and also through operations, to make sure that we have the right coaches in place so that schools get the results they need to see academically.
Okay, awesome. So what I've found during the civic engagement project that I've been doing is basically no one knows what summer slide is. So can you explain it a little bit?
Yeah, so summer slide is really I guess the terminology given to the fact that when students are away from the classroom, they lose some of the knowledge and skills that they were able to obtain during the previous year of learning. And so they literally academically sort of slide backwards. And then when school starts again in the fall, teachers have to sort of pick up a few steps further behind than maybe they would have if school had continued throughout the year.
So like reteach them.
Yes.
Why do you believe summer slide awareness is so important?
Well, I think that there are some things that we can do individually as family members when we are aware of the issue with summer slide. I think there are some things for us to consider as communities when we realize that the space that's between the end of the school year and the beginning of the school year causes some learning, slides.
Okay.
And so I think it's important that we have some awareness about that.
Okay. And what demographic of children do you think are the most at risk for a summer slide?
Yeah, I haven't really looked at the research behind it, but I would suspect that the biggest group of students are those of poverty, mostly because kids are curious. All kids are curious, and they learn through exposure to different things. And so kids of poverty don't have access to as many opportunities that create natural learning through creativity. They don't have access to the zoo or to vacations that
Some little things.
Yeah, other families do that allow kids to nurture that curiosity and make connections to their learning. And so my assumption is that it's probably kids of poverty who struggle the most with summer slide.
Okay. And what age groups do you believe are the most effective?
Yeah, again, I think it's the littles,
Little guys.
the little guys, the probably kindergarten through 3rd grade, 4th, 5th, those that are really don't have the opportunity maybe to be in groups over the summer or interact with their peers or out in the community without adult support. And so I think probably the younger kids are the most impacted. Although older kids, when they get in front of video games, I mean, we see some of the same effects.
Laying around all day.
Yeah, and still in that case, at least on video games, kids are collaborating with one another, so they're talking to their friends and
Getting a
things,
little
but they get some interaction, yeah.
And what do you believe we as a community can do to combat summer slide?
So I think that as a community, when communities offer summer programs like summer camp or day programs where they go to the park and there's a magician and we're engaging kids in that way. I also think some communities around the state are looking at year-round schooling, which sort of extends the school year but then gives breaks at different times, so there's not really that big gap in learning time. And then I think as parents, when we recognize it, we make sure that we still read to our kids over the summer and that we still do environmental math and environmental literacy type activities
Just
with
little
kids.
things during the day.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks.
All right.